Well, good morning. My name is Liz Perez, and I am going to be continuing us on in this series, Contrary to Popular Belief. And this morning, I'm going to be speaking about how friendship with fear is really greater than conquering it. So I'm going to be talking about fear, but before I do, I want to say Happy Mother's Day to all of you mothers. I myself am a mother of Sam and Sophie Perez. Sam, who just graduated from college this weekend, and we're so proud of him. And being a mom has been one of the greatest joys of my life. So whether you're social distancing or you get to be with your people, I hope you feel celebrated this morning, all of you moms. Well, I am speaking about fear this morning, and honestly, I'm a good candidate for it because fear is a normal emotion that all of us feel, but there are some of us that have personalities that are a little bit more bent towards fear. And I am one of those. I am one that I have a very vivid imagination, and so it doesn't take much for me to imagine worst case scenarios, and I can move there pretty quickly. So I've had to do a lot of work around this, so I kind of feel like fear and we got a thing going. So I'm excited to bring this to you this morning. Well, we've been working on our basement as we've been in our quarantine and just cleaning it out, and that's been awesome. But one of the things that comes with cleaning out your basement is you kind of go down memory lane. We've come across things that the kids have made for us, like on Mother's Day, old pictures, fun things that they just used to play with. So it's been really a sweet time. But in all that, I came across a stack of journals that go all the way back to really my early 20s. It was kind of post-college, before getting married, having children, starting careers. It was kind of the start of my whole young adult life. And so I took some time out just to read and look through those before deciding what I wanted to do with them. And there were several things that really struck me as I read back through them. One was I saw how much I worry, which it's kind of hard for me, but no surprise for sure. But also in that, as I was pouring my heart out to God, whether I was just writing things or even praying about things, I was also really grateful that at a young age, it just came natural for me to reach out to God in my need and in my fear. So I was really grateful for that. But the other thing that struck me is that I could tell I was in a Christian environment where teaching on fear had really impacted me. And so these were some of the things that stood out to me. I noticed that in my writing, and again, I remember this, that I had internalized that fear is bad, fear is wrong, fear is sinful. If I have fear, possibly my faith isn't even really working for me, so then there's shame. Fear is something to be prayed away, and fear is something to be conquered, either by God or giving it to God. And so all of these things just really stood out to me. And what I also noted was what that really took from me, that kind of internalizing of how I should navigate fear. And what I noticed was several things. I noticed that it kept me from living in the present. And by the way, fear does that. Fear often will take us to living in the past or living in the future, especially the future. Will I have enough? Will I be prepared for something bad? And so it really kept me from living just in this present life. So that was one thing I noticed. I think the other thing I noticed is that the kind of teaching I was around kept me very disconnected. And the best way for me to describe that is in mantras that I would use. And I'm not taking a shot at mantras. Mantras can actually be very helpful. I have some in my life that are helpful for me. But some of the mantras around fear were, God's in control, God's got it, God's sovereign. Things that I'm not saying aren't true, but it just felt so very disconnected. It's as if I was being taught, just do that and cut this part of me off. But the dilemma for me was, even though I might move in those arenas, I still would always end up still with fear that I sometimes had shame about, because I would tell myself, I guess I'm not a really good Christian if I'm feeling this fear. I think the other thing that it did in my life is that it kept me from taking responsibility for my life. And this is what I mean by that. I think sometimes my stance was one of prayer. God, take this away from me. Help me with this. Be there for me in this. All of which, again, I love the fact that I had a reach for God, which is still special for me. But I think what it kept me in is a position of just this and not moving out. In fact, in some ways, I think it was a way for me to kind of hide. Like, I'm praying about it, I'm giving it to God, but I don't have to move into it. Instead of believing that God lives in me and through me, and I can pray and then let's go. It makes me think of, I love the passage in Exodus 14 where Moses is leading the Israelites out of slavery, and he's up against the Red Sea, and Pharaoh and his army is literally barreling down on them. And, Moses had stopped from time to pray to let God lead. And God says clearly, Moses, get up. It's time to move. And so sometimes I think that's important. But as I look back, I think how I took in a lot about fear, it would just keep me just not really moving and taking responsibility for my life. And then I think the last thing that really struck me is that it really also created this place for me not to trust myself, which for those of us that navigate fear a lot, usually something that's right behind or close second to it is not trusting ourselves and having a lot of doubt. So I was already set up for this. But then on top of it, what got layered on top for me was not to trust myself. A lot of the teaching that I was around was, my mind, my thoughts, these are bad. They will lead me astray. My heart, my emotions, do not trust them. They will lead me astray. This body is bad. And so layering that already on top of a young gal who already had a hard time trusting herself was just so detrimental to me. It kept me from trusting that, wait a minute, God lives in me and through me. And by the way, He created me. I certainly have many limitations and weaknesses and lots of places to continue to grow, but I also have gifts and strengths that He's created in me. But it took from me this ability to trust myself. Well, I kind of just want to talk a little bit about fear for a minute before I take us through a passage that I want to look at. Fear is just like any emotion. God has given us emotions, and they are best to be not evaluated as either good or bad. They just are. They come over us. Emotions have energy to them, and they all have healthy aspects to them. We can learn to regulate them, and some of them even regulate us, like joy. They can't be negotiated. You can't negotiate and just say, I'm just not going to feel these emotions or these emotions. They just come over us. And by the way, parents, it's really key for us to understand that we need to help our children. Like, in other words, if I tell my child, well, you shouldn't feel sad, you actually should feel grateful. What we're doing in that moment is we're telling them to disconnect and not trust themselves and not trust what's showing up, instead of letting them connect to their emotion and then learn, what can I do with this? How does this lead me? And fear in particular, what's beautiful about fear and healthy about fear is that it really gives me the opportunity to reach out for help, to reach out for comfort, to reach out for assurance. There's a reaching that just naturally comes from fear. Now, we don't want to get hooked in it or get reactive in it. That's when it becomes destructive and not healthy. But in its own health, fear actually helps me to be prepared for something that is dangerous and that is real. If I'm hiking up a mountain and a boulder's coming barreling down the mountain, fear will kick in a nanosecond, and it will connect into my body. My adrenaline will, move into action, and I will move out of the way. Fear is really important for us. And sometimes we take fear and anxiety and we start to interchange the words, but really, the best way to describe that is fear is related to a real threat. It's a real known threat, and it moves and it protects us. And as I said, it allows us to ask for help and for comfort. Anxiety is basically it comes out of fear, and it comes out of the unknown and the poorly defined, but an expected threat. So I'm not going to go into those too much, but I just kind of want to define them a little separately, because I'm talking about just fear is what I'm talking about. And by the way, we have fear. We have fear in our life right now that is real, that is not imagined with COVID-19, whether it's fear for my health, fear I might lose my job, or oh no, I lost my job. Will I get another job? These things are real for us. And on top of that, many of us have fears that are even at other levels. Emotionally, often our most common fear is fear of rejection or abandonment. And then our greatest fear as humans is loss of life. Loss of life. And in our Western culture, we do not talk about death and we don't normalize it. Now you might be thinking, come on, Liz, it's Mother's Day. You're going to be talking about death, loss of life? Yeah, I am. Because it's important to know what we do with it. Most of us spend most of our lives trying to avoid, manage, deny, delay loss of life. Now, it's human, so I don't think we need to beat ourselves up about that. I love in the Gospel of Mark, there's 3 different times, all within just a couple chapters, that Jesus is beginning to talk to his disciples about his death and that it is coming. And it's fascinating to see what they do, all 3 scenarios. In one, Peter kind of pulls Jesus aside and he's like, psst, Jesus, let's not talk about that. And of course, Jesus rebukes him. In another, it says he's talking about his death and they literally just didn't know what to do with it. So they just avoided it. And then in another scene, they again are dumbfounded and want to avoid it. And so they just change the subject and make it about them. We naturally avoid things that are uncomfortable for us, especially until they are literally face to face and right in front of us. So I want to actually read a passage of scripture to you. It's Matthew 14, 24 to 30. It's a famous passage. Most likely you've heard it before. This actually comes out of one of Jesus's busiest days. He has just spent the day feeding 5,000. And at the end of that, he says to his disciples, hey, let's go to the other side of the lake. And then he gets out and he goes up into the hills to have time alone and to pray. But the disciples are left in the boat, and which ends up in the lake. And then all of a sudden, an intense storm comes through. Now, for those of you who live here in Nashville, if you were here in Nashville last Sunday, you would have experienced what's called a derecho. I had to look that word up. It was an intense windstorm that I've never experienced before. David and I were just out cleaning up the yard and it started, the sky was getting black, but then within just a few seconds, the trees started really swaying and we were just getting pelted with like sticks and leaves and branches. So we went running inside, turned on the TV to see if possibly it was a tornado coming and we needed to take cover. And the weatherman said, he described what it was. This is a long, intense line of powerful wind. But he did say, hey, if you got friends that are on the lake, text them and tell them, get off the lake, this is coming. Which made me remember a time where we were on Center Hill Lake, one of Tennessee's finest. And same thing, a storm just came out of nowhere. The skies got black and the waves we went from just calm water to our boat was rocking back and forth. Waves were coming up over, lightning. I mean, it was literally terrifying. So imagine that. This is the scene that I'm going to pick up on in Matthew 14. Meanwhile, the disciples were in trouble, far away from land, for a strong wind had risen, and they were fighting heavy waves. About 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came towards them, walking on the water. When the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified. Of course. In their fear, they cried out, "It's a ghost." But Jesus spoke to them at once and said, "Don't be afraid. Take courage. I'm here." And I just want to stop there for just a second. What I love about those phrases that he used, don't be afraid, take courage, I'm here. Those are very, very soothing and comforting things that he's saying. From an attachment perspective, as I see this as a therapist, those are phrases that are basically saying, I'm here, I'm your person. I often talk about those of us that have had little children. Remember that when they were little and they were scared, a nightmare or whatever, it was just very automatic for us to just scoop them up and go, it's okay, it's okay. And if you took those two words, it's okay, and you just wrote them down somewhere and you were reading them, you just go, oh, it's okay. But the way that they're being used to comfort is, it's basically saying, you're okay, I got you, I'm your person, I'm strong, I'll protect you. That's what's happening. And from an attachment perspective, when we are experiencing that, everything physiologically inside of us just starts to be comforted. You can literally feel a child's body just start to kind of go from rigid in their fear to just comfort, which is so beautiful. And it's so beautiful that those are the words Jesus offers. So they're clearly looking right at him because they're going, is it a ghost? And then they hear his voice. Take courage. I'm here. And then Peter calls out to him and says, Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water. I love Peter because Peter is just so like, let's go. And he's out there. And so he's moving towards him. And he says, yes, come. So Peter went over to the side of the boat and walked on the water towards Jesus. Like, that's pretty significant sentence there. But when he saw the strong wind and the waves, he was terrified and he began to sink. And he said, save me, Lord. He shouted, and Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him. So a couple things that I just want to point out there. First of all, pretty significant that Peter just ran out there and said, I'm going to start walking. I'm just going to go meet him. The fact that he looked to the side and saw the waves is so human. I love that. It would have been scary to be in that boat, but to start walking on the water and to look from side to side and go, humans don't walk on water. And I'm walking amongst big waves. That would have been very frightening. And I often hear this passage being taught kind of in a, like the lesson is basically just keep your eyes on Jesus. Don't look at your circumstances. And I actually want to offer something different today because I actually think it's very human for us to see our circumstances and to feel fear that is real. Like I said, we're going through things right now. The circumstances can be very fearful for us. I sometimes will be working with people and teaching them about mindfulness and meditation, and they'll say, well, Liz, I'm not good at that because, my mind wanders. I have a monkey mind, of which I always say, right, that's called being human. We all do. The power and the strength and the healing is in constantly bringing your mind back. Bringing your mind back. And so when I think of this story, what I love is that he looked and he saw and he got frightened. And instead of just saying, don't look at your circumstances, keep your eyes on Jesus, I guess what I would like to offer today is, oh, the waves are big. You're going to feel some fear. That's real. Just keep coming back. Just keep coming back. And what I love is that naturally what came out of Peter was the reach. He just said, save me. Just save me. And that's the beauty of fear. Fear gives us the opportunity to reach out and to say, save me. So many of us were raised in environments, either homes or school or sports, that taught us, don't ask for help. That is weak. And yet, it's actually really strong. The most courageous thing to do in life is to feel our fear and to ask for help or to ask for soothing or for comfort. And parents, I want to say this to you. Sometimes there's even a fear that if we comfort our children, it's coddling or it'll make them weak. And yet the reality is when they get to when they experience comfort and safety from us, they actually then internalize that. Oh, I can reach for this and I can even give it to myself as I get older. And they become braver because then they can go out with confidence and then keep coming back. It's amazing. So my title is Friendship with Fear is Greater Than Conquering It. So what does it look like for us to have friendship with fear? And what I mean by that is it's really relating to it, acknowledging it, noticing it. For some of us, we're so afraid of fear, we won't even look at it. So for some, it might just be going, oh, there it is. It's fear. And just acknowledging it. And this may feel counterintuitive at first. There are studies that show that if you just acknowledge fear, it has less power over you. Like sometimes I'll ask my clients, I'll say, I can tell we're talking about something fearful, and I'll say, well, what are you feeling? And they'll say, just a little scared, or just a little nervous. Or if they even get close to the word fear, they might say, it's just a little fear, but it'll go away. Don't worry about me. And I don't know why we feel we have to qualify all these things. What would it be like for you just to say, what am I feeling? I'm feeling fear. I'm feeling fear. And feel it, let it wash over you. Not get reactive and hooked in it, but let it lead you. Possibly for asking for help or comfort, or maybe even something else. The other thing that's important that I talked about at the beginning is taking responsibility. I think the more we get to understand fear and its role in our life, then we can go, I can also just feel it, but still take responsibility for my life. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is feeling the fear and still moving in. And I don't mean in a reactive way. I mean in a grounded, open, and receptive way. So it's the chance for us to still feel it and to definitely employ and ask God for his help. He lives in us. My mentor always says, all that we need is already within us. We just may not have tilled it or developed it or cultivated it enough. But God's Spirit lives in us. And then the last thing I think that's important for us to think about is fear, like I said, keeps us from living in the present. The more you begin to have a relationship with fear and notice its role in your life, the more you're going to go, oh yeah, it's stealing me from living in the present. And my invitation to you is to push back on that, to find different tools to go, I'm just feeling my fear, but I'm not going to get stuck in the past or in the future. It takes me out of living today. I don't know if you've ever had the chance to be around somebody who's had a near-death experience. Maybe they've been in an accident and then they survived, or they've had to wrestle with cancer and they survive. There's a fascinating part that comes out of that I see in folks that have gone through this. There is this sense of peace about dying. It's like they go, yeah, I'll die. We all will, by the way. And I'm okay with that. But what it also does is it gives them this sense of, and I'm going to live this life now. This life I have, I'm going to live it today. Not worrying about if it's going to come. I know it's going to come. I'm going to live present today. What a gift that is for us. And so this is my invitation to you to have a relationship with fear. I hope some of these things help you. I know for myself, one of the greatest gifts that has come out of my relationship and dealing with fear is also learning to trust myself again. And again, that would have been hard for me to say probably almost 10 years ago, because I was so taught in my religious circles that was bad. But learning to trust myself, my own wisdom, my own tuition, and that God is also in me and that I'm growing is a real gift. And what I notice is the more I do that, the more fear dissipates. So that's my offering to you today. I'm going to pray for us, and then in this spirit of stillness, I'm going to also then turn it over to Nicole and Lionel and let them lead us through some worship. And then David Perez will come on at the end. Let's pray. God, I am so grateful that you have made us with our intellect, with our emotions, with these bodies, and specifically around fear. I pray that we will continue to be curious and show ourselves much compassion in this area. If there's some unpacking and some undoing, help us to go after that around fear. If there's some healing and new ways of relating to it, help us to go after that. I am so grateful for this church. I am so grateful for these people. Be with us in this time until we come back together again. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Well, I will say we miss being with all of you, and we really look forward to being back together again soon. Stay with us as this goes now to Lionel and Nicole, and then David will come back at the end.
You meet us where we are, in our longing, in our searching, never distant, never far, from our fearing, from our suffering. God is with us, a very present help, a very present help. God is for us, a very present help, a very present help. This song's inspired by the verse Psalm 46:1 that says, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. I love this quote from Thomas Merton about God's presence. He writes, God, who is everywhere, never leaves us. Yet he seems sometimes to be present, sometimes to be absent. If we do not know him well, we do not realize that he may be more present to us when he is absent than when he is present. You find us when we're lost, in confusion, in frustration, soul fatigued and tempest tossed, in our anger, in our hurting. God is with us, a very present help, a very present help. God is for us, a very present help, a very present help. Be still, my soul. God is with me. God is for me. Be still, my soul. God is with me. God is for me. Be still, my soul. A very present help, a very present help. Be still, my soul. A very present help, a very present help.
I held, yes, I'm held by the one who won't let go. I am held, I am held, I'm held by the lover of my soul. I'm no longer a slave to fear, 'cause I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear, 'cause I am a child of God. No, I'm no longer a slave to fear, 'cause I am a child of God. No, I'm no longer a slave to fear, 'cause I am a child of God. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. You drowned my fears in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and see that I am a child of God. Yes, I am a child of God. Oh, I know I am a child.
Well, that is our service today, and I am so glad that you are joining Sparrow Day online. And so first, I want to say before I close, Happy Mother's Day to all of our mothers out there. And so I hope you have a wonderful day, and all of you that have a mother near you, celebrate her, call her, tell her how much you appreciate and love her. So happy Mother's Day. Well, I am so grateful for this message that Liz has taught on fear. I know for myself, man, I used to do all kinds of things with fear. I used to biblify it, in a sense, cast it out, run away from it, and which really wasn't a deep spiritual process at all. It was actually another form of avoidance. I just used religion to do it. So I've just learned in my own life that the more I become friends with fear and move towards it and face it, actually the more it diminishes. Well, we have some wonderful things coming up at Sparrow Day and even Sparrow Day online. So in the upcoming Fridays, I want to introduce you to something called Lunch and Learn. So you have to eat lunch on Fridays. So at 12 noon for the next few Fridays, if you take 30 minutes, we're going to have a wonderful couple, Rich and Dory Gorman, who are really an accomplished couple. They used to be ministers at an inner city church in Chicago. Dory is now the chaplain. She's the chaplain for the entire YMCA of Middle Tennessee. And Rich is doing more graduate work at Vanderbilt University in psychology. And for the next few Fridays, they will be having a lunch and learn. So Dory, this Friday, is going to deal with anxiety. So find our links at sparrowday.com. And then in a few weeks after that, Our own Liz Perez will do a lunch and learn on marriage. So stay attuned to sparrowday.com. And then next week, I will be back with this series called Contrary to Popular Belief. And I'll be looking at the whole idea that mystery is greater than certainty. In Christianity, we've really oversold assurance and promise and certainty. And so next week, I'm going to take a contrary view that, oh no, mystery is actually more securing, more assuring than promises and certainty. And Pete Enns is going to join me for a portion of that, best-selling author Pete Enns. And I just also want to say thank you that if you continue to give and to donate to Sparrow Day, you are really helping us get our voice out in this time. So, and it's really easy to give at Sparrow Day. You just go to sparrowday.com. You'll see a little thing up top at our website that says give, and it's a very safe and secure way. And so we are so grateful that you're helping get this voice out of this new kind of Christianity all over. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, we'll see you next week, everybody. Be here as Pete Enns will join me.